Hello and welcome to a new backcountry snowpack summaries for the North Shore Mountains, brought to you by North Shore Rescue on Friday, February 4th, 2022. We're out at Mount Seymour Provincial Park today, and it's snowing. Winter's back. The avalanche hazard, according to Avalanche Canada this morning, is high in the alpine, high at tree line, and moderate below tree line. So, my thought with this video today was to discuss a little bit how we go about managing something like this. So, as Carl Klassen of Avalanche Canada says, an avalanche forecast is a theory. And then when you go out, you want to put that theory to the test. So we're starting off this morning with the theory that, given a chance, the snowpack is going to kill us today. So of course, putting that theory to the test, we'll need to factor in a pretty wide margin of safety. So we looked at maps and we discussed our plan, and we agreed that we were going to stick to low angle terrain, and we're going to gather some more snowpack information to see if that theory seems to be right. So the theory is based on two main factors. If you click on the details tab of the forecast, you'll find the snowpack description. And we're talking about maybe 40 centimeters of old storm snow. That's the snow that fell actually last weekend, sitting on a really hard crust. And at the bottom of that snow is a weak layer, like a bunch of crystals that are very poorly bonded together. So that's one part of the equation. The other part is the weather forecast. So the weather forecast in that bulletin is calling for maybe up to 40 centimeters of snow today, with some possibly strong southwesterly winds. So of course that new snow on its own is certainly a concern. And also whether or not that layer down at the bottom on the really hard crust is able to tolerate that weight. So I think that this hazard forecast seems to be making sense given what we know about the snowpack and what we expect about the weather. Now I was lucky enough to go on the Sunshine Coast a little bit in the farther reaches of the South Coast region early this week, and that snowpack discussion or description was pretty bang on. We had like 35 centimeters of really nice snow with a layer of about 5 centimeters of weak snow sitting on a hard crust. So that's what I know about the snowpack. Now our plan today is to go out and investigate whether or not this holds true for right here and what we experience on the North Shore. We're now at 1,300 meters on a west aspect, and of course we don't want to bank too much on just one spot observation like this. So as we're making our way up, we did a few sort of informal tests and constantly assessing the snow. And one thing that was obvious here this morning that definitely wasn't what I experienced on the Sunshine Coast earlier this week is the presence of a crust in the top layer here. So, in the avalanche bulletin, we're talking about, up to 40 centimeters of snow that fell last weekend. Now, that snow is actually accompanied with quite a bit of wind, so the distribution is can be significantly different from place to place. So the crust that we had on the surface last weekend is really obvious to find. It's this huge block of ice down here. But what's interesting is in this profile that we chose, here we actually have like 59 centimeters of snow. And the snow that fell today, we're talking about 40 centimeters maybe in the forecast. And so far, around lunchtime, we have about 10 centimeters of snow that fell. So, is it going to increase quite a bit this afternoon? I'm not entirely sure. But the snowpack description, with the exception of the crust, and stiff snow up here seems to hold. So as we move down the old storm snow, you have the crust here. The rest is pretty stiff until you get about maybe 10 centimeters above that crust, where all of a sudden things get really, really weak, sitting on a hard crust. Now, as we were traveling, we found that this crust actually gave some pretty good bridging, so we didn't get much ski penetration, which means that it would be maybe a little bit more difficult for a skier to be able to actually go and tickle that weak layer sitting on the crust down there. So I think that this significantly changes the way we approach the terrain and the likelihood of triggering an avalanche. Now, we have to be extremely careful when we go out and we assess the snowpack and what we find doesn't exactly match what we were expecting. So this morning there was no mention of this crust, and then looking at some of the weather stations overnight, some recorded about 15 millimeters of rain last night and early this morning, all the way up to 11 or 1200 meters. So you have a little bit of moisture that has broken down this crust a little bit. It still offers good bridging, but in some places it's really hard, in other places you punch right through it. So there's a lot of spatial variability. So you have to be very cautious not to say, oh, there is a crust, it offers good bridging and therefore the hazard shouldn't be as high. You know, we still have like a stiff layer lying on top of something that's very weak, you know, about 40 to 50 centimeters thick. And while we do get good bridging, you know, that's banking a lot on that top crust to make sure that, you know, you're not going to be able to trigger anything further down. So as we move towards the weekend, with the weather forecast, I'm not entirely sure how much snow we're going to get this afternoon. It does seem like we're getting maybe a little bit less than forecast, and then the sun is going to come out. And I think the name of the game this weekend will be spatial variability and careful assessment of the snowpack. Don't put too much faith into this layer, especially if it gets warm, if it's sun affected and it starts to break this top crust down. You have a little bit less bridging. Remember that right down there close to the crust, that snow is really quite weak. That's all I got for this week. Stay safe this weekend and see you next week.